Right. Hi. Um, Welcome to the first live of 2022, and Happy New Year to everyone. Be great if you're watching on the replay or if you're watching live, do say hi and ask any questions that you do have. So I'm really pleased to introduce Candice King, who is an expert coach working with parents of teens. And I think it's fair to say, as a parent of four, well, parent or step parent of four teens at different times, we're really pleased to have you here and to hear about your expertise. So, um, do give us introduce yourself and give us a sense of what sort of work you're involved in, Candice. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. So, yeah, thank you, Yoni. I'm really excited to be here. I'm quite honored to share this space with you, incredible parents. And as Yoni said, my name is Candice King. I am a neuroscience and emotional intelligence coach. And I have a love and a passion for emotions because for me, that is really the superpower that lies within all of us. So we can really begin to show up with intention, show up with purpose, and really be authentic in the way that we act. So for me, that's the powerhouse, that's the superpower that we can tap into. And I am a mom of two teen girls, so I'm actually walking this journey alongside a lot of you, falling, stumbling, learning, making mistakes. And I've just had such an incredible response from parents who seem to be struggling with their teens at the moment, from teens themselves. It is such a huge growth period for teens as they step
Yeah.
into teenhood, as they kind of separate from their parents. There's this disconnect. And for parents, it's like, oh my gosh, my baby's not a baby anymore. I feel like this void in my life and really trying to navigate this time together. So, it's been quite a learning experience for me as a parent and as a coach. But I'm hoping to help and guide you this evening with whatever questions you may have.
Yeah. I was saying before we started that I put a request out to both this group and also a couple of other adoption groups about what things that they were struggling with. And one I got 40 or 50 different responses, which was quite good. But there were some definite themes in that. Particularly asking questions about parenting girls, but the themes were sort of around drama and communication and peer relationships, and I'm thinking that's probably quite an international um, issue for parents, really.
Yeah. I think, as your daughter or your teen, it can be your son as well, steps
Mm.
into this new realm of teenhood, they're really trying to establish their place in the world. Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in my throat. They're really trying to establish their place in the world. And so there's this almost like, where do I belong? Where do I desperately so want to fit in? They really, really want to encourage parents of teens to try and allow their teens to find a place of belonging where they love themselves for who they are and how they fit in. It is a process. It doesn't always happen. I don't know if you remember the movie Mean Girls,
Mm.
where there's this like queen bee situation, and it happens. It's real. It happens in schools. There's a lot of bullying, and there's a lot of vying for position of who's going to be top notch, and that tends to cause struggles within relationships and struggles within friend groups. People change because they're so desperate to fit in that they might behave out of character to what they were a year or two
Mm.
prior, and that obviously causes conflict within a friend group or with relationships.
Mm. And looking from the outside, it does seem like relationships are quite fraught within teens, and I suppose they're all working it out, and but sometimes they can be so hurtful to each other
Yeah.
or to parents. Is that part of the sort of testing boundaries, perhaps?
Yeah, so just a little bit of neuroscience behind it is the growth in the emotional brain during teenhood is exponential. It's one of the biggest growth times of the emotional brain happens within teenhood. So compared to the rest of their lives. So they are not really operating from like this prefrontal cortex rational thinking. It is all quick emotions, and so there is this pushback, there is this bit of nastiness because they actually don't know how to navigate themselves through their emotions. And for me, that is what I'm really passionate about with teens, is teaching them how to identify what they're feeling and how to navigate themselves through that, and then setting healthy boundaries and having really good conversations. It's a practice that I've done with my oldest teen. She's 15 now, and she's had some issues she's had to deal with. And it's hard because not a lot of teens are open and receptive or even have the skills on how to have these kind of conversations. So
Mm.
you've got to have somebody in the group that's practicing this, because then they pick up on it. It's like, as a parent, we're modeling behavior for our children. If we're modeling that behavior to our teens, they can hopefully take that into their friend group and start planting little seeds. I know it's wishful thinking, I know it's hopeful, but if they're practicing this, I'm almost certain as they grow into their adulthood, they'll be really well-rounded adults.
Mm.
But it's really about starting with self-awareness and their emotions for me.
Yeah, and I guess because of puberty as well, the emotions are quite up and down anyway. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, what would you say about because obviously members of the group are doctors or some foster carers, and so you've got that added layer of the changes that have happened as a consequence of being involved in adoption and loss. Um, are there particular things that you think adopters maybe should or could be doing in that sort of search for identity that teens have? Because quite often that's the time that gets particularly rocky for adopters.
Yeah. I think really for me that speaks into to so there's two parts to it. I feel the one is being really aware in terms of your relationship or how you showing up as a parent, whether you're an
Mm,
adopter or a carer or a parent. It's the same. It's the child that's obviously having a different experience, but it's how do I parent and how do I show up as a parent. And this is very much what I'd like to drive in the next year, is being aware of our own sort of belief systems that play in the background. You know,
mm,
what is showing up for us. Maybe we are parenting like our parents parented. Maybe we have cultural influences that are showing up in how we parent. So really being or having that self-awareness, and being authentic and vulnerable as a parent, and then having that conversation and connecting with them on that level. Sometimes as parents, we want to go and we want to fix and we want to help and we want to, sometimes it's
mm,
just about holding back and asking questions and just not trying to fix things, I think would maybe be the best tool. I mean, we want them to be well-rounded. We don't want them to feel lost, or yeah, you want them to have a path and go along this path, but it's hard when they're feeling so lost. And the thing is, because
mm,
teens have separated from their parents or from their parental figure and now
mm,
turning to their peers for more guidance, it's really difficult to control that. So it's just about communicating and connecting with your teen at their level and stepping out of that place of judgment or presumptions that you may have about what's happening.
mm. Do you one of the things that came up was about relationships with boys or sexual relationships. I guess that's also something um, that people have to negotiate quite carefully with
Yeah.
teens.
I think in that particular conversation, definitely never too late to have the conversation. Definitely never too late to have an honest conversation. I mean, just from our personal experience, my daughter is 15. She has a menstrual cycle, and I've said to her, be aware of what you do. not to say that she's doing it well, I'm hoping she's
Mm.
not, but you can fall pregnant. This is a reality. And these are your hopes and dreams and aspirations for when you're older. If you have a baby before you finish school, it's pretty much that's going to be your life for the next 20 years. So really having, without threatening, without blaming or judgment, having a real vulnerable conversation with them, and allowing them to share their fears and their concerns. And it also, for me, it sort of flips back to teaching them about boundaries, because maybe they find themselves in a situation where they don't know how to say no. No is no, but can they communicate that properly? Is it a peer pressure thing? These are the conversations we need to be having, particularly with our girls.
And I know I've seen sort of documentaries and research around the teenagers' understanding of consent, and that, well, not just teenagers, but I'm thinking particularly about young people, that actually boys and girls don't always understand what consent is and how and how to express that in terms of sexual relationships. So yeah, it's really important, isn't it? Do you do you see an impact with social media on teens? I know we talk
Yeah,
about it a lot, but
100%. I think one of my biggest concerns is social media, and the reality is it's here and it's in our faces. So, we can say, oh, you're not having Instagram and you're not having this and you're not having that. And that's fair enough if that's what you want to have in your home. But we also have to be open to the fact that it is part of our life, and we need to guide and help our teens navigate that social media space. So again, it really goes back to having that open communication and being able to talk to your teen vulnerably about this kind of stuff. So there's the dangers, obviously, of social media in terms of being in contact with horrible people, but also from a self-worth, self-love perspective. If you go onto TikTok now, so I'm on TikTok purely because I follow my two girls. That's the rule in my house. If you have social media, I follow you. And one of my daughters showed me a TikTok where they switched filters on and off and how the people look so different. And it's just reminding them that there's no such thing as perfection. That person is posting this perfect life, but you have no idea what is happening in the background. So just reminding them that it is not real, that on social media is not real, because they go into this complete space of comparison. Like, my life is awful. We're not holidaying in Spain, or we're not driving a Mercedes Benz, or I haven't got the new Air Force Ones or whatever it is. And it impacts them, and it impacts their self-worth. And it can have a devastating effect on them. So it's, again, back to communicating and chatting, and really the way that you can do that is getting onto their level, getting interested in what they are interested in. And that's how you start building that communication and connection bridge. Because the minute we distance ourselves, well, we're in the process of your teen pulling back. So it's really connecting with them and talking to them. So for instance, again, I'm just referring to my life because these are things that I've done and have worked. And so my daughter, who's 13 and is my biggest teacher in this whole teenage world, is really into Dream SMP and Minecraft. It drives me absolutely dilly because it's noisy and I really couldn't care less. But her and I log heads, okay? We don't communicate well. Well, we never used to. And then one day I thought, I'm going to go into her bedroom and have no agenda. Because as parents, we're busy. It's like, tidy your room, pack your bag, put the dishes in the kitchen, moan. That's all we do. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to have absolutely no agenda. And I jumped on her bed and I said to her, what are you watching? Tell me a little bit about this. The excitement and how her face lit up when she was sharing with me what was going on. And it's taken, I can honestly say, a year and a half for her to get to the point where we can actually have a really vulnerable, deep conversation about stuff. So for me, it's that. It's really connecting on the level. It's really talking to them about stuff that doesn't have an agenda. asking questions that will give you insight into their lives without them feeling like you're being invasive. Like, where have you been? Who have you been speaking to? There's other ways around that we can get in and get information.
Mm. And it's quite a parallel to the work that I've been doing with Keely Craw, who's a play therapist, and we've created a course that encourages um, child-led play. It's the child setting the agenda and setting the time and having that distinct space. And I'm thinking that there must be a teenage sort of equivalent in a way, because certainly the carers who've done it have found it really powerful, exactly in that way, spending that time, because you're right, we're so busy, running from appointments to appointments, work, and getting meals prepped and all the rest of it. It's quite hard to have that time, and it's really valuable. um I think one of the other things that sort of came up quite a lot was teenagers, and you've touched on it, emotional sort of dysregulation, and how to help a teen sort of develop skills to regulate their own emotions. Any thoughts that you have um, on that?
Yeah, so this is my passion and my love is emotions, because for me, it is about really exploring your emotions, and if we can help and guide our teens to do that, and basic tools like, the teen might not be able to identify what it exactly is that they're feeling. But as you know, because emotions are chemicals that are released in our bodies, there will be a physiological reaction in your body. So, for instance, for me, if I get really super anxious, I get this radiating feeling from my solar plexus. And then I know that I'm like, okay, I need to do some breathing. I need to breathe through this. But that is a learned skill. So it's really starting to get your teen to start tapping into, how does it feel in my body? And can I associate that with an emotion? And that's where we build up our emotional vocabulary. So when we started reading at school, it was basic words like lad sat on the mat. And how many times did our kids have to repeat and repeat and repeat that for sound, for shape of letters? And eventually they recognized what it said. It's exactly the same with emotional intelligence. We need to just keep practicing. What am I feeling? What emotion am I associating that with? Once we've built that emotional literacy, we can move on to recognizing when that sort of always happens. Like, so when before I have a big exam or a big test, I get anxious. Okay, so that's what happens. Now I can navigate that emotion because I know what it is, I know when it happens, and now I
Mm,
can put tools in place to help me shift through that. So, for instance, for anxiety, box breathing is fantastic. So that's breath in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, in for 4, and you keep repeating it. And it sort of calms that emotional brain down, it calms the nervous system down. And so, as parents, it's having these small little tools that we can help and teach our kids how to navigate the emotion, not
mm,
shutting it down. I don't know when you were growing up, Yoni, but when I was growing up, the belief system that that formed for me was big girls don't cry. Candice, you're not allowed to get angry. It's wrong. How can you get angry? You're a girl. Don't cry.
mm,
Others, I'll give
mm,
you something to cry about, and you're like,
mm.
okay, I'm not allowed to feel this. I'm not allowed to express this. It's
Yeah.
encouraging them that, and especially for boys, especially for teenage boys, they are allowed to
Mm,
cry. They are allowed to get angry. It's how we navigate through that. If they're becoming destructive, it's not
mm,
positive. And that's when
mm,
you ask some questions. So really allowing them to feel that emotion and helping them shift it. It doesn't have to be this big thing of reflection and over analyzing it. It's just
mm.
teaching them those tools.
And you can see that a lot of emotions, like particularly with men, aren't allowed to cry, and they're not allowed to be scared, and they're not allowed, and so all of those emotions then are translated into aggression, or frustration, or into much more sort of negative and actions and behaviors that then create additional problems.
Yeah.
And I recently did some training on the impact of understanding and understanding trauma, and how the experiences of trauma then dumb down children's and young people's abilities to even recognize the emotions that they're having, never mind actually expressing them. So you can see so many common themes in understanding that, and then watching even adults who can't express their emotions and what that does. But yeah, I certainly had the same experiences, that you're not supposed to express any of your emotions or be upset or hurt or
Yeah.
anything. um what what do you think is a way of sort of negotiating boundaries with teens? Because I think that was something else that was raised quite a bit in the groups, where
Yeah.
people were struggling or challenged by that.
So I think this is a question that actually came up in my Facebook group as well. Is I set healthy boundaries for my teen, but then they're saying, oh, but that person's parents allows them to do X, Y, and Z. So it's quite a fine line to set those boundaries. For me, especially with teens, boundaries and consequences, 100%. And consequences are your discipline now for teens, because
Mm,
whatever you were doing in the past when they were little doesn't really work now as they're older. And I don't mean discipline in a negative sense, I mean it in a positive reinforcement sense. So consequences, again, for me, need to be doable, number one. So as a parent, can you stick to the consequence that you set for them? And number two, can you hold fast in that? Because the minute you falter, the minute you go, oh, it's okay. So let's say, for instance, you've asked your teen to take the dishes out of their room for the umpteenth time, because we know how teens like to leave dishes in their rooms, and they're just not doing it, and you feel like a broken record, and you're constantly fighting, and you say, okay, well, I'm taking your cell phone away for 2 weeks. Can you stick to that?
mm.
Is it worthwhile going through that pain? So really deciding what you can do, and can I stick to it? So there's actually a really fantastic format in having this conversation. And if we have time, I'd love to share it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So for me, this conversation kind of needs to happen within 2 minutes. Very, very succinct, very clear. And stepping out of any presumptions or assumptions or judgments or criticisms or finger pointing, number one. So you'll start the conversation along the lines of mentioning to them what the issue is at hand. So thinking about it like a video clip in a movie. So you're not judging or finger pointing, you're just saying, this is what keeps happening. All right.
Mm.
Then you're going to tell them how this impacts the relationship, or what the impact has on this kind of behavior. All right. So maybe it is because they're not taking their dishes to the kitchen and you keep fighting. So it's impacting our relationship as a mother and teen, or mother and child, father and child. And then you're going to speak about how it makes you feel. So this is tapping into your self-awareness as the parent, or your emotional state. So it makes me frustrated, makes me angry, it makes me sad, whatever your emotions are within that. You give the teen an opportunity to reply, okay, because it is a two-way conversation, but you say to them, I'm giving you 1 minute to respond to this. In this moment, if you feel like there is a sense of defensiveness or anger from their side, or you getting defensive and this is the time for you to circle back. So basically to step out of that conversation, because with frustration and anger and defensiveness, nothing ever good comes out of those kind of conversations. So saying to them, okay, you know what? I need 5 minutes or 2 hours, or tomorrow we're going to revisit this because we're not getting to the point here. And then you discuss the way forward and what the consequences should they not follow through. Again, just reinforcing the fact that making sure your consequences are manageable and that you can stick to them. So that's sort of the conversation that you'll have. It's like I say, it's 2 minutes, it's to the point. I think as parents, we want to over-explain, and we want to tell them when we were younger, this is what it's loses its impact. They go, oh my gosh, there goes my mom again, So
Yeah.
really keeping the conversation focused. But Boundaries basically is what's okay and what's not okay. It's not okay that you don't take your dish to the kitchen, um, and this is the consequence if this doesn't improve. So yeah, I hope
Wow.
that's helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Do you do you think it's possible for parents, maybe perhaps with hindsight or greater knowledge, they think, well, actually, maybe I've let my teen have too much freedom, or I haven't really followed through with those boundaries. Is
Mm.
it then possible to sort of double back and put that relationship on a bit of a better footing?
I do believe that relationships can be repaired. I do believe that you can revisit stuff. It may not be as easy. I realize that I've parented both my teens very differently. Um, but again, for me, it really boils down to having those vulnerable conversations and saying, actually, I've never parented a teen before. And so I'm really learning as I go. As much as you are learning as a teen, I'm learning to parent a teen. And I think we need to put one or two extra boundaries in place in this situation. And how do you feel about that? How do you think that'll impact you? Because I feel strongly that it needs to happen. You're not giving them permission to say yes or no, it's going to happen. You're just saying,
Mm,
they're old enough to say, if you're getting to the point you think, okay, maybe I've let it slip a bit. We're talking about the older teens.
mm,
And so you can say to them, how do you feel about that? Because I really feel this needs to be put into place. I'm not saying it's going to go well. I'm not saying that initially. I'm not saying that it's going to work by any means, but it's definitely an opportunity to have that conversation.
mm. Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. Um, One of the other things that came up quite a lot was sort of building teenagers' confidence and what sorts of things parents could do to encourage them. Like we've been talking about comparison in social media. Sometimes they're struggling with that a bit.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to self-confidence, it's definitely having that conversation about social media, number one, but also getting them to do things that feed them, that intrinsically motivates them. So doing stuff not because you've said they must and they're not good at it, or you pushing them into a subject at school that they're really not good at, really allowing them to do things where they're feeling good about themselves. If it has become a big issue, again, having a conversation about what is happening for you right now, talk me through it. Why do you feel like that? Or what is it about your hair, your eyes, your legs? I mean, my daughter she's 15 and she's 5'10". She is very tall. And the whole of last year, we struggled with her height. She didn't like the way how tall she was. And what didn't
Mm.
help is the boys were teasing her at school about it, saying, "You'll never
Yeah,
get a boyfriend, and boys don't like tall girls." And it was heartbreaking because she used to
yeah.
cry. And so we just spoke about the benefits of being tall, and
Okay.
you building it up like that. So it is a work in progress. It is a really hard time that our teens are navigating at the moment.
Mm,
So there's a book called Comparisonitis, and I love that word because it speaks exactly into what comparison does, that it's actually a disease that can grow if it's not stopped.
mm,
Um, and starting to get them to look inwards and start doing things that they love and feeds their confidence, what they're good
mm,
at. And that'll
mm.
start turning that around.
Okay. Yeah. And links into something that I heard somebody say, and they were talking about um, comparison, and when you see things on social media that you're really quite envious of, actually to turn that round and make that into a goal, because it's clearly something that you want, and so to make that into a positive rather than just sitting being envious of what somebody else has done. And actually they had this conversation with their daughter, who was a little bit past teenage but not much, and so the daughter contacted the person who she was quite envious of because she was traveling, and found out how she'd done it, and then the next year she went traveling. And so
Wow.
I really I really like that reframing
Yes.
of
Yes.
being being envious.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's fantastic, the reframing and spinning it on its head for even for adults. If we find
mm,
ourselves in that negative headspace, that comparing headspace, is to look at it from a different perspective. And it is really a choice. I know that sounds quite simple, but it is really just a decision to say, okay, I'm either going to make it a goal, like you said, or I'm going to try and find the positive out of this, and start feeding into that as opposed to the negative.
absolutely. Um, I think the other thing that people were struggling with sometimes was engaging teenagers, and suppose I can certainly see some experiences where teenagers just lock themselves in their room and they don't really want to engage with the rest of the family, and that can be quite challenging. Any thoughts on how
So
to address that?
So, number one, the locking themselves in the room is absolutely normal. As frustrating as that is for parents, it drives me dilly. My 13-year-old daughter has got a do not enter sticker on her door. We went to the hardware store. She's like, I want to buy that sticker. I said, for what? She said, for my room. I said, but you already lock yourself in your room. She's like, it's all right. So now we've got the sticker on the door. So it is really normal for them to go into their own space. Their bedroom is their safe haven. It's time for themselves to chat to their friends. And I certainly give my girls their space. Their doors are closed. I do knock before I go in, showing them the respect that they need. But in terms of drawing them out, there's a couple of things that I really want to encourage you as parents to do, because it is absolutely vital in terms of growth as an individual for them to connect with the family. So you might get an eye roll or huff and puff or a grunt, because that's generally the way that the teens are communicating with us. So encouraging them, or maybe talking to them about and we can start small with one dinner a week together. I mean, again, I know our lives are busy. Maybe your partner's working late, maybe you working late, maybe the kids
Mm,
got sports, but find one day in a week where you can have dinner together without the TV on, whether it's at the dining room table, if you don't have a dining room table, on your lounge, in your lounge area. But there's this engagement and this conversation, because that is vitally important, for you to
mm,
be connecting. I can tell you right now, when I do it, I get that teenage rounded shoulders, droopy face. Do we have to sit yes, we have to sit at the dinner table. And within 2 minutes, we've turned it around and we're talking about the school day or what happened at school or whatever they want to talk about. And
mm,
just in that moment, it is so healing, and you get into that routine. So it's really about finding that something that you can do together. And if it's not dinner, 5 minutes in the morning, or if you're driving your kids to school, I know things are a bit different there in the UK, but just having that snippet of time where you're just connecting with them, whether it's both parents or just one parent, it's just having
mm.
that time to connect.
I I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, and she was talking in one of her books about having family meals, and that everyone talks about something that they're grateful for as a part as a beginning stage, and that generates quite an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And I know some of the adopters have taken that on as
Oh,
something
beautiful.
to do.
So we actually, I ended up buying, I've got it on my bookshelf there. It's called Conversation Jar. So at one point, my girls weren't teens yet. So it's a jar with cards in it,
Mm,
and we would pull out a card and it would be a question. And then we would all have to talk about that question. It was actually quite fun. And it's like finding the gratitude within the day, because it's difficult to get into conversations if you've got a sulky teen at the table. How do you, like, you can say, like, how was your day at school? And they're like, fine. What did you do? Nothing. You're like, okay. So it's like drawing blood out of a
yeah.
stone. But if you have a conversation starter that's a little bit of a different question, it might
Mm,
draw them out into deeper conversation. I actually at the end of last year on my Facebook page, I've posted a few questions for parents to ask teens that weren't too invasive, but got conversation going and also gave you a bit of insight into their life without, like I say, being too invasive in their space.
oh wow, that sounds really good. So how can people who've enjoyed our conversation as much as as I have, how can they get to know you a bit more or link up with you? It's the best place
Awesome.
to find you.
So yeah, I have got a Facebook group called Cracking the Teen Code. Have a look for that on Facebook. Ask to join. I'm about to launch my coaching coffee date. So this is a connection time. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet, live or Zoom, but just to share on topics that parents of teens are struggling with. Or you can follow my Facebook or Instagram page. It's Candice King Life Coach, or find me on my website, which is www.candiceking.co.za. And I'm South African, if you hadn't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I should have started with that. Oh, that's been really interesting, Candy. So I really appreciate it, and I know that some of the my community will definitely be finding out more about you. Um, so thank you.
Thank
And just to say in the wrapping up that in my group, I have a paid group, Community Ohana. The next course that we we have coming out within that group is going to be we've got trauma and understanding trauma, and there is a yoga course for
you.
little ones and for primary school age children. So if people are interested in that, then do let me know. So thank you again, Candice,
Thank
and
you.
speak soon.
All right.
Just
Bye.
bye.